If your family thought you couldn't hear a word they said, and then you suddenly could, would you tell them, or would you listen long enough to catch every lie and set the perfect trap? I spent 7 silent years reading lips, nodding at guesses, laughing a beat late. Last month, a surgeon laid a small miracle behind my left ear, and the world rushed back. Kettles sang, floorboards sighed, the refrigerator hummed like an old hymn. But the first voices I heard weren't prayers. They were my daughter-in-law and grandson in my own kitchen, whispering about guardianship papers and liquidating assets like my life was a yard sale. So I made a choice. I tucked my miracle beneath my white bob, smiled the same slow smile I used when I taught second graders how to tie their shoes, and I pretended I was still deaf. I'd waited years for sound, I could wait a few weeks for justice. They wanted my home, my savings, my freedom. What they didn't know was that I also got my hearing back for their footsteps, their late-night phone calls, the way greed changes a voice. I wasn't going to shout. I was going to listen. And then I was going to make them answer. My name is Lillian Monroe, but most folks call me Lily. I'm 80, 5'2" in my church shoes, and I keep my silver hair in a neat bob because curls tickle my neck when I bake. I live in a small yellow house on Willow Street with hydrangeas that show off in June and a front porch that remembers every grandchild's first steps. The day I turned my processor on, I wore a soft blue cardigan and my good pearls because old habits matter. You dress up for new beginnings. Dr. Patel clapped when I repeated the first list of test words. Baseball, I said, and he laughed like I'd won something. In a way, I had. Sound isn't a faucet you flip, it comes back shy, like a cat you haven't fed in a while. Voices are the trickiest. They need practice. He warned me about fatigue. He warned me about frustration. He didn't warn me that the first voice I'd hear at home would try to sell my house. By late afternoon, the processor felt comfortable under my hair. The world sounded like it missed me. I could hear the kettle before I saw the steam. I could hear the rain tapping the porch rail like a guest who doesn't want to impose. I stood at the stove stirring chicken and dumplings, and I let the sound of the spoon clink against the pot remind me that I was alive and present and whole in a way I hadn't been in years. Then the screen door whispered open. Ty, she won't even know we're talking, Vanessa said. Her voice is smooth on Sundays, sharp on weekdays. I'd learned her mouth shapes over the years, now I heard the edges too. It's not about kindness, Mom, Tyler answered. My grandson. 26, sneakers too white, hair cut like a hedge, a watch he can't afford unless someone else pays the interest. It's about timing. The market's up. We list now, we get top dollar. I've got a buyer at Harbor Ridge who'll close without an inspection. We just need the paperwork to look clean. The processor hummed softly, catching a street noise and smoothing it into everything else, but their words landed crisp. I held the spoon steady and kept my shoulders easy. After 7 years of silence, you learn stillness. You learn to make your face a safe place for other people's arrogance. Guardianship is the simplest route, Vanessa said, lowering her voice only a fraction. Lower doesn't mean quiet, it just means meaner. Judge sees an old woman who can't hear, who fell twice last winter, who forgets her pills. He signs it. We keep her comfortable in oak pines, and we restructure the assets in a trust that. I don't want oak pines, Tyler cut in. It smells like boiled cabbage. And I'm not heartless. We'll get her a nicer one. But we need the deed and her bank info before Caleb files the petition. If she, you know. I could almost see the shrug in his words. If she balks, we can say it's just to pay bills for her. Optics. My hands didn't shake. I stirred, tasted, added a pinch of salt. I turned, smiled. I touched my ear the way I always do, 2 fingers to the shell, the old signal. I can't hear you, dear. Speak up. We'd made a life around that gesture. Lesson 1 of survival, leave people inside the picture they painted, at least until you're ready to tear it down. Vanessa stepped forward all syrup. Hi, Mom, she said, raising her voice and enunciating like I was a child. You shouldn't be cooking. Ty and I were just checking in. Her perfume smelled like winter fruit and money. Tyler kissed my cheek. Love you, Gran, he said. The words easy and practiced, the tone new, impatient, almost buzzing. He looked at the pot. Smells great. I set 3 bowls on the table and watched their faces while they ate. The processor delivered the tiny sounds I'd missed, the scrape of spoon on porcelain, the swallow, the sigh. But it also delivered something else, the way greed makes a voice bright when it should be soft, saccharine where it should be respectful. Vanessa complimented my dumplings and then, in the next breath, asked if I'd found the mail from the bank she'd helpfully stacked on the whole table. Tyler asked, "Do you remember your online login, Gran? I can set up autopay. Just write it here." He pushed a notepad toward me. He'd chosen a pen that leaves no imprint, smooth gel, not a ballpoint. It would have made Walter chuckle. My late husband used to say, "You learn more at a kitchen table than you do in any boardroom." He was a machinist. He knew metal and people. Both bend under the right pressure. I put my hand over the notepad and smiled my schoolteacher smile. "Right," I said gently, tapping my ear. "No here, dear." I made my mouth lazy around the words, the way hearing people expect from the deaf. "It's a trick. It buys you time." Vanessa's eyes flickered toward the hallway, the office, the file cabinet, the safe behind the quilt frame. I'd watched her map my house for years, taking what she liked and calling it helping. She stood with their bowls and carried them to the sink. "We'll take the trash out," she said to Tyler without looking at me. "And we'll see if there's anything else that needs tidying." The moment they stepped into the hall, I set the spoon down, wiped my hands, and went to the drawer by the phone where I keep my little notebook. The cover's worn, the pages neat, a ledger of 7 silent years, appointments, lip-reading notes, passwords I wrote in code only I can unbraid. I added a line with a calm hand: Oak Pines, Guardianship, Harbor Ridge, Caleb. Then I closed it and slid it into my apron pocket. Lesson 2, write it down. Memory is a blessing, ink is a plan. They left with too many smiles and a bag of my dumplings for later. As the screen door swung, something dropped, a small white card. My hearing caught it, a papery whisper against the rug. I looked down after they drove away. The card said, Caleb Stone, ESQ, Elder and Probate Law. On the back, a note in Tyler's tidy print: Friday, 10 a.m. bring ID. I turned the card over twice, then slipped it into my pocket beside the notebook. I locked the door. Grief taught me to keep moving. The night Walter died, I baked muffins for the hospice nurses because my hands needed to do something my heart couldn't. That old muscle memory kicked in. I made a pot of coffee and picked up the phone. Step 1 was my bank. I asked for Brenda, the branch manager who sends me Christmas cards with actual ink. "Lily," she said, and I could hear the way her voice softened, the way kindness sounds different than pity. "What can I do?" "I want paper on everything," I said. "If anyone turns a single thing digital without me standing in front of you, you call me. And if any power of attorney paperwork touches my name, you press pause and call me twice." "Done," she said, already typing. "Anything else?" "Yes," I said. "You still rent safe deposit boxes?" An hour later, I was in a sweater and my raincoat, my processor hidden under my hair, my keys in my hand. The bank smelled like carpet cleaner and new 20s. Brenda signed me in and handed me a little brass key. "You want me to?" "No," I said gently. "Just the room, dear." Inside, I placed 3 things into the velvet mouth of the box: the original deed to my house, a blue envelope Walter labeled in his square hand, for when you need courage. I'd never opened it. Courage is sweeter when it waits. And a printout I made years ago of my will, which names me, not anyone else, as the guardian of me. Laws change, papers need refreshing. Theo, the lawyer my neighbor Ruth swears by, would help with that. But for now, they were safe where Vanessa's fingers and Tyler's schemes couldn't reach. I added a 4th item, a thin digital recorder Ruth bought for me when I started speech therapy. "You'll need to hear yourself to get better," she'd said. Now I needed to hear others. I pressed the rec button and tucked it into my purse, the little red light blinking like a heartbeat. One party consent is a phrase I'd read. I planned to be the party. On the way home, I stopped by Ruth's townhouse. She's 78, a widow like me, with bird bones and a laugh that could float a parade. She opened the door before I knocked. "You have your ears on," she said, delighted. "How do I sound?" "Like a trumpet." She trumpeted. I laughed. Laughs sound different when you can hear them. "You sound like relief," I said. Then I told her everything. I didn't have to show her the card. She already had a pen in her hand, writing Caleb Stone in block letters on an index card. "He's slime," she said. He gets his referrals from a guy who drinks martinis at noon. We'll get Theo. Theo answer his own phone. Ms. Monroe, he said, and I could hear his slight stutter. Ruth calls it his honesty hiccup. I can meet tomorrow at 9. Bring whatever you have. And, this part is important, don't confront them yet. Let them feel safe. Predators get sloppy when the water's still. I prefer to call them children who forgot their raising, I said softly. But yes. Still water. That night, I practiced. Sound tires you like a long drive, it fills the spaces where silence used to rest. I lay on my bed and closed my eyes and listened to my house speak, the heater ticking, the neighbor's car door, the far-off bark of a dog who always thinks the night is intruding. I turned the processor off and on, learning its rhythm, trusting it. When I turned it off, the world fell back into soft cotton. When I turned it on, it unfolded like a map. Control is a gift. I slept with the recorder on my nightstand and the blue envelope's secret whispering from the bank into my dreams. Theo's office smelled like coffee and books. He's 38, hair too long near his collar, tie crooked in a way that makes you want to fix it. He listened without interrupting, which is the best kind of listening. When I set the business card on his desk, he frowned. We've bumped into him before. He files guardianships fast. Judges trust his forms because they look neat. He tapped his pen against the card. We'll preempt. We update your medical directive, refresh your will, and we place the house in a revocable trust with you as sole trustee and Ruth as backup. That strips the court of any argument that a third party should help. We also file a letter of intent about your preferences, no facility moves without your consent, period. And if they try to sell the house? I asked. He smiled in a way that warmed me. They can sell the air above it, Ms. Monroe. The dirt will still be yours. We drafted. We signed. We notarized. Theo's paralegal, a woman named Jamie with purple nail polish and the kindest eyes, slid a folder my direction. Keep this on your person, she said. And put copies in that safe place you hinted at. I liked her immediately. People who take hints without asking for the whole story are rare. On my way out, I called Brenda from the sidewalk, the traffic sounding like a new language I could almost speak. One more thing, I said. Set a flag for any cashier's check more than $1,000 trying to leave my accounts. I'll be making one today, for a retainer. But after that, we pause and verify. Done and done, she said. You baking this week? Always, I said. Justice rises better in a warm kitchen. Back home, I put on my apron with the faded cherries and got to work. Cinnamon rolls. Pecan pie. Chicken salad because Vanessa likes it and Tyler pretends he doesn't, then eat seconds. A busy kitchen draws family like porch lights draw moths. I left my processor on, my recorder in the flower vase on the table, and the folder from Theo under a dish towel with little blue cows. I also left one other thing in plain sight, the small brass key to the old desk in the guest room, the desk nobody uses. The key fits nothing important anymore, but they didn't know that. Bait matters. By 3, the hydrangeas were nodding in a breeze and my kitchen smelled like forgiveness. The screen door sighed. Gran. Tyler called. You home? In here, I said, loud enough for the recorder to catch my voice without giving myself away. I touched my ear, the old signal, and waved. He came in alone, which meant Vanessa was in the hall touching things. He looked around the kitchen like a contractor. Smells amazing, he said, and he meant it. Can I? Plates there, I said. I slid him a fork. He took a bite and closed his eyes for a second. It's hard to be cruel with your eyes closed. We have a meeting Friday, he said when he swallowed, casual like weather. Just some paperwork for your benefits. Easy stuff. I'll drive. I nodded slowly, letting my smile bloom lazy. Paper, I said. Okay. He ate 2 rolls and put a third in a napkin. I watched his hands, the way they hovered near the dish towel hiding Theo's folder. He didn't lift it. He doesn't like cows. He did, however, pocket the brass key. He thought he did it smooth. Hearing made the theft sound like a coin in a church plate. He left as the porch light clicked on. I stood at the sink and let the water run over my wrists. Cold wakes you up twice. I dried my hands, slid the recorder from the vase, and tucked it into my cardigan pocket. Then I walked to the guest room and opened the desk. Inside was a blank envelope with medical records written in my hand. Nothing in it. The real records sat in Theo's folder. I stared at the empty envelope and felt the old ache bloom, a mix of love and fury and the grief that your own family could be strangers if you look at them in the wrong light. Still water, I told myself. Let them get sloppy. Thursday morning, I baked again and hummed on purpose when the door opened so they'd think my new habit was mindless. Vanessa wore a cream sweater and too much confidence. She smiled big and patted my hand. Tomorrow is going to be easy, Mom, she said, slow and loud. The lawyer will explain everything. She looked at my mouth to make sure I was smiling back. I gave her my warmest teacher grin. The recorder blinked. Tyler checked the hall, then came back, balancing his phone on his palm. Caleb confirmed, he said. 10 a.m. Don't forget ID. ID, I repeated, and I let my voice catch just a little, the way it used to when sound was guesswork. He softened. Even predators remember kindergarten sometimes. When they left, I locked the door and sat at my kitchen table with the blue cows and Theo's folder and the card with the word Caleb scowling at me. I opened the recorder and played the last minute, listening to their voices on my terms. I copied the file onto a thumb drive Jamie had labeled in purple ink, Monroe, Evidence. I placed it in the folder. Then I picked up the recipe box from the counter and took out a card I hadn't touched in years. It wasn't a recipe. It was a map Walter had drawn on a blank card 1 week after we signed the deed, a map of this house, with a small X penciled under front room north wall. I pressed my hand to the wall and felt what I'd always known was there, a void behind the baseboard, a narrow space that holds a cigar tin with something that never needed to see daylight. Courage ages, but it doesn't spoil. Friday 10 a.m., I'd walk into Caleb Stone's office wearing my soft blue cardigan, my pearls, and the same patient smile I wore for 7 years. I'd forget my hearing. I'd bring my ID. I'd bring my recorder. And I'd bring one more thing I hadn't told anyone I had, not even Ruth or Theo, tucked where paper meets promise, waiting to be the stitch that finishes a quilt. I reached for the front door when I heard a car pull up and doors slam, heavy, hurried, like guilt-wearing shoes. I pressed rec, slid the device into my pocket, and turned the knob. I pressed record, smiled sweetly, and opened the door to their lies. The morning of that Friday felt like a page I'd already turned. I brewed my coffee, buttered my toast, and made my face soft, the way people expect from a woman who has no idea what's happening. But inside, I was sharp as a pin. I wore my pale blue cardigan again, it makes people underestimate me, and I tucked Theo's folder into my big brown purse. My hearing device hummed beneath my hair, a secret as steady as a heartbeat. I slipped the recorder into my pocket and checked the little red light twice. At 9:30, Tyler pulled into my driveway with his spotless SUV, music thumping so hard I could feel it in the porch rail. He hopped out wearing a navy blazer, crisp shirt, and the kind of grin that pretends everything is a favor. "Morning, Gran," he said too loudly, as if I couldn't hear. "Ready for the big meeting?" I touched my ear and smiled. "Paper," I said softly. "Yes." My voice still carried that lilt he thought was a guess. He opened the passenger door like he was chivalrous, but I saw his eyes dart to the front windows, checking if anyone watched. A guilty man always checks. Inside the car, Vanessa sat in the back, phone glued to her palm. She wore cream again, she likes to look like money, and greeted me with syrup. "Good morning, Mom. Don't worry, this is just a formality. Caleb will explain everything." Her voice dripped sugar, but I could hear the impatience underneath, like static between stations. The drive downtown took 20 minutes. I listened the whole way, pretending to gaze out the window. Tyler and Vanessa whispered about timelines and distribution, and whether Oak Pines would take her before winter. My knuckles whitened around my purse strap, but I kept my face peaceful. Still water, I reminded myself. Still water drowns faster. Caleb Stone's office was on the 4th floor of a glass building that smelled of bleach and ambition. He greeted us in the lobby with a handshake too polished, his suit too tight across the shoulders. "Mrs. Monroe," he said, slow and deliberate, as if speaking to a child. "I'm Caleb. We'll just go over some paperwork today, very routine." I nodded, touching my ear, and he smiled with the confidence of a man who thinks he's already won. He ushered us into a small conference room. A folder sat at the center of the table, fat with papers. I placed my own purse on the table, close enough for the recorder to catch every word. Here we are, Caleb said, sliding forms toward me. Guardianship petition, durable power of attorney, healthcare proxy. All standard. This way your grandson can take care of things for you, bills, property, medical decisions, without you having to worry. I let my eyes linger on the lines, lips moving like I was trying to piece them out. Vanessa leaned in, all false comfort. It's for your safety, Mom. You won't have to lift a finger. Tyler added quickly, it'll make things smoother. You can focus on yourself. I looked at the stack, then at them, then at Caleb. And then for a beat, I looked straight at my purse, where the recorder's light blinked steady. My heart thudded, but my voice stayed small. Safe, I murmured. Yes. I took the pen Caleb handed me, twirling it between my fingers like I wasn't sure which end to use. Then I let it hover above the line. Caleb cleared his throat. Tyler leaned forward, holding his breath. And then I set the pen down. No, I said, calm as church bells. Vanessa's smile cracked. What do you mean, no? I touched my ear, tilting my head as though I hadn't caught it. No, I repeated, firmer this time. My eyes never left Tyler's face. Caleb tried again, patient like a snake. Mrs. Monroe, perhaps you don't understand. Oh, I understand plenty, I said, my voice suddenly clear, crisp, and steady. The way I hadn't spoken in years. The processor hummed in agreement under my hair. I understand every word you've all said to me this week. I understand your plans to put me in Oak Pines. I understand your buyer at Harbor Ridge. And I understand exactly what guardianship means when people like you are in charge. The silence in that room was sweeter than any hymn. Tyler's face drained color, Vanessa's hand froze over her phone, and Caleb's smile flickered like a light bulb about to burn out. You can hear, Tyler whispered, disbelief cracking through his voice. I leaned back, folding my hands neatly. I can hear. And I can prove it. I tapped my purse where the recorder glowed. Every word you've said in my kitchen. Every word you've said in this car. Every lie you've tried to dress as help. Vanessa's mouth opened, then closed. Caleb cleared his throat. Mrs. Monroe, surely we can come to some. No, I said again, firm enough to make him flinch. This meeting is over. I stood, tucking Theo's folder under my arm, and walked to the door. Tyler half rose as if to stop me, but one look shut him down. Years of teaching children how to sit still can still silence a grown man. In the hallway, the air felt brighter, cleaner. My steps echoed. Each one sounded like freedom. But inside me, the storm was only beginning. Revenge wasn't finished with words in a lawyer's office. Revenge needed proof, exposure, and a reckoning. As I pressed the elevator button, I heard Vanessa's voice behind the closed door, sharp now, stripped of sugar. She knows everything, Ty. What do we do? The doors slid open, and I stepped inside with a smile. I had them exactly where I wanted them. Because they didn't know yet that I had one more card to play. I didn't go straight home after I walked out of Caleb's glass box. I called Theo from the sidewalk while the city hissed and hurried around me. He answered on the second ring and I could hear his pen click. You didn't sign, he said, almost smiling through the phone. I didn't sign, I said, and my voice felt strong in my own ears. And they know I can hear. Good, he said. People who think they're winning get sloppy. Come by. His office smelled like coffee and something toasted, Jamie's cinnamon bagel. She pushed a mug toward me and set a small digital recorder next to mine like a nurse laying out instruments. Theo listened to the clip of me refusing and nodded. Clear, steady, unambiguous, he said. And we have venue and context. We'll add this to the file. File. I said, teasing, because the word made something inside me loosen with relief. Files mean order. He turned his legal pad around so I could read the list: trust recorded, medical directive refreshed, letter to bank, letter to county recorder flagging any deed activity, draft complaint, elder exploitation, attempted fraud, draft bar complaint, Stone Caleb. He tapped the pad with his pen. Last time you were here, you mentioned a buyer at Harbor Ridge. Vanessa's voice said no inspection, I told him. and that they'd close fast. I glanced at my purse where the recorder slept, its little red eye frozen for now. Do you know them? Theo's mouth tucked. Know of them. They'll walk away if there's a whiff of trouble. But before they walk, they talk. I'd like to hear it. Then let's set the table, I said. I'll bake. They always come when I bake. We didn't call the police, not yet. Theo knows the Elder Justice Unit, and he promised a detective named Alvarez would be looped in if we needed someone with a badge and patience. But he wanted more rope. People like Stone, he said, they don't file guardianship out of the goodness of their hearts. They file because they already told someone else they could deliver. If Harbor Ridge put anything in writing, if Tyler or Vanessa send a single text with a number or timeline, it's a nail. Then I'll be a magnet, I said. Bring me nails. On my way home, I stopped at the church. The sanctuary was empty, bathed in a blue light that always looks like forgiveness to me. Pastor Elaine was in her office with her feet tucked under her like a girl reading. She opened her arms when she saw me. How's the world sound? She asked. Like itself, I said. Like it missed me and came back a little shy. She laughed. And your family? Like a hive, I said. Busy. Stinging. When her face changed, I waved it off. I've got a plan. I might need a room on Saturday for the women's circle at 10. And if any of our church ladies want chicken salad, I'll have extra. She knows how to hear between words. We'll be there, she said. I went home and changed into my apron with the cherries fading to pink. By late afternoon, my kitchen smelled like cinnamon and roast chicken and coffee. I put 2 pies on the counter to cool and texted Ruth, leave your porch light on. She replied with a thumbs up and a string of knives and pie emojis because she's a woman of both mercy and spice. At 7, my door swung open without a knock. Vanessa doesn't believe in knocking when she's already mapped a place with her eyes. She wore pearl studs and a cream sweater and had her lipstick perfect in that color that makes her look like she's tasting something sour. Tyler followed, jacket off, tie loose, trying friendly like he was trying on a shirt that didn't fit. Gran, he said, too bright. We wanted to make sure you got home okay. I lived through a war and disco, I said mildly, sliding a pie into the fridge. I can manage a car ride. I touched my ear and smiled, small and teacherly. Old gestures are useful until they aren't. We brought you dinner, Vanessa lied, setting down a brown bag full of napkins and nothing else. She took a breath to launch into her script, but I wobbled a little on purpose, just enough to make her mouth turn into concern. You should sit, she said quickly, guiding me to a chair like she invented furniture. Ty, get Mom some water. Tyler filled a glass and set it in front of me, his eyes flicking around the kitchen counter drawer, the dish towel hiding Theo's folder, the one with the blue cows he doesn't like. We talked to Caleb, he started. It seems there was a misunderstanding. Ms., I said. I curled the syllable like a cat. Understanding. He thinks you're frightened, Vanessa cut in, folding herself into the chair across from me. She leaned forward, low voice, and for the first time since I've known her, she sounded almost like a person. Mom, it's just paperwork so we can help. So you don't have to worry. No one's taking anything from you. I looked at her face. Pretty. Cold. She comes from people who confuse expensive with good. I like worrying, I said, and her eyes did a little twitch that made me love the truth. Worrying keeps me from being surprised. Tyler tried again. We can bring a notary to you. Tomorrow morning. It'll take 5 minutes. Then I can set up your bills, fix the paperless thing, and we can get you into a safer place before winter. Oak P, he stopped himself. Somewhere nice. Tomorrow, I repeated, making my mouth slow on the O's. I looked at the clock over the stove. 7:20. What time? 10, he said, a little breathless. 10, I said. I'll make coffee. They relaxed like rubber bands coming off a stack of money. Vanessa's smile came back fake and pearly. As they stood, I let my hand drift to my purse and tapped the recorder with my ring 2 soft times, a habit now, like checking a lock. I walked them to the door. On the threshold, Vanessa squeezed my arm and said, thick with performative care, we just want what's best. I looked at her. So do I said. And my best looks different than yours. She blinked, uncertain whether she'd been blessed or cut. They left. The car doors shut with that careful thud expensive cars have, like they're swallowing secrets. When their tail lights disappeared, I locked the door and went straight to the guest room. The little brass key was missing from the dish by the phone. I saw Tyler pocket it yesterday, heard the tiny clink. The desk didn't need the key, my decoy envelope inside only said medical records, and held a grocery list. But passing the dish, I found their replacement, a plastic key cut at the hardware store, cheap edges, slick with effort. They'd practiced on my house in small ways for a long time. People rehearse betrayal with minor roles. I sat on the bed and dialed Theo. "They're bringing a notary at 10, I said. "To my house." "Let them," he said. I could hear the click-click of his keyboard, a modern rosary. "We'll be parked across the street. Detective Alvarez will be with me. She prefers quiet entrances. We'll let them explain themselves in your kitchen. Jamie's drafting a cease and desist with all the relevant statutes in bold. We'll slide it across the table when it's time." "And Harbor Ridge?" I asked. Ruth texted, he said, amusement in his voice. She and Pastor Elaine invited their project manager, Mr. Sutter, to the church's fixer-upper brunch at 9. He thinks he's hearing about a donation. He's bringing his acquisitions guy. I grinned despite the ache building under my ribs. "Bless the women's circle." "Always," he said. "Leave your door unlocked so they don't scratch your frame. Put the recorder where it can hear everyone. And Ms. Monroe, if you get scared." "I'll bake," I said, and hung up to proof the dough already rising in its bowl. Sleep didn't want me, so I walked the house. I touched the picture of Walter in the hall, the one where he's 25 and looks like a boy who hasn't yet broken a single promise to himself. In the living room, I knelt by the front room's north wall and pressed my palm to the baseboard where Walter's pencil had once drawn an X on a recipe card. Sound makes secrets louder if you know what you're listening for. I heard the hollow. I slid a butter knife under the molding and popped it gently. Plaster dust kissed my wrist. My fingers found tin, cold, thin, a shape that fitted my memory like a hymn fits your mouth. I pulled the old cigar tin free and held it in both hands. I didn't open it. Not yet. You don't rush a last gift. At 9 the next morning, my kitchen looked like December. Coffee, cinnamon rolls, a plate of butter cookies with a thumbprint of jam in each. The recorder blinked inside a flower vase, its little red eye steady. I wore the soft blue cardigan because people imagine softness is surrender. I put my pearls on for Walter. The front door was unlocked. At 9:03, the screen door eased and Ruth came in humming, carrying a foil pan of baked eggs and a smile that could talk a bridge into building itself. "Elaine's at the church," she said, setting the pan on a trivet. Sutter texted, "On our way." He added a winky face. "Bless his heart," I said, buttering a roll. At 9:17, someone knocked who doesn't know me. I looked at Ruth and put a finger to my lips. She ducked into the hall like a stagehand. I opened the door. 2 men in gray suits stood on my porch holding nothing. One was blocky with a red tie and a lanyard that said Metro title. The other was thin with expensive shoes and no socks. He smiled like he'd hidden a coin behind my ear and now wanted applause. "Mrs. Monroe?" he asked. "Lillian," I said. "I'm Mr. Sutter," he said. "We've heard so much about your generosity." "And this," the thin one said, stepping forward, "is Michael. He handles the, facilitation." They were early. Good. That meant their confidence was bleeding into carelessness. I ushered them into my living room. They glanced at the lace curtains, the quilt on the back of the sofa, the framed school photos of grandkids at various heights. Michael's eyes stuck on the baseboard for a fraction of a second, which made me glance too. The molding sat flush, the tin slept where I left it, inside the sideboard now, wrapped in a pillowcase. "Coffee?" I offered. They took their cups black, because men who deal in other people's houses like to believe they taste stronger. I set their mugs in front of them and let the quiet sit. In silence, people show you the shape of their greed. "So," Sutter said, brightening, "Harbor Ridge is very excited to help families like yours make transitions." He spread his fingers, palms up, like he was giving away sunrise. "Our acquisitions are quick, discreet, and generous." Michael slid a glossy one-sheet across the table. I didn't look. I listened. Your grandson has an excellent sense of timing, he added. He mentioned guardianship. That will simplify. Once your grandson is guardian, title is not a problem. I let my mouth fall small. Guardian, I said, turning the word like it was new. Someone to make decisions for you, Sutter said smoothly. To make sure you're comfortable. Michael leaned back and crossed his ankle over his knee, showing off shoe leather. Tyler told us you're ready to move somewhere that helps with, he circled his hand in the air, the hearing. I smiled sweetly. I hear a great deal, I said. Michael chuckled like he'd been charming, then reached out and patted my hand. I let him. A second later, his phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it. He's outside. Tyler? I asked. Sutter nodded. And the notary? We can do everything here. 10 minutes. Your coffee's getting cold, I said, standing. I walked to the counter, put my back to them, and slid my phone from my pocket. I texted Theo, in. Buyer here. They said, once he is guardian. Driveway. The reply came faster than the kettle starts. Parked. Wait. The front door opened without a knock. Vanessa came first, glossy and purposeful, with a woman behind her in a beige suit carrying a seal and a narrow mouth. Tyler followed, teeth white, shoulders tight. Gran, he said, but the word fell between us like a drop catching fire. When Vanessa saw the Harbor Ridge men at my table, she flashed relief she couldn't hide. Perfect, she said. Everyone's here. Let's sit and, she stopped because she caught something in my face she couldn't name. I turned my head slightly and tapped my ear with 2 fingers. Old signals are anchors for people who want you still. We all sat, the men from Harbor Ridge, the notary so self-important she squeaked, Vanessa with her careful smile, Tyler with his knee bouncing under the table, me with my pearls and my hearing and my quiet. The recorder listened from the vase, steady, patient. Mrs. Monroe, the notary began, we'll need you to sign a limited power of attorney so your grandson can. Unlimited, Tyler murmured. Assist you, she finished. I folded my hands and let my eyes go soft the way new widows do at potlucks. I like to understand what I'm signing, I said. Caleb Stone's voice floated in from the doorway like a bad smell. He'd been on the porch listening, smug. Of course, he said, stepping in without invitation. Everything is in your best interest, Mrs. Monroe. Theo once warned me about lawyers who use your last name like a leash. I looked up at Caleb and smiled my teacher smile, the one that made second graders sit up straight. Then explain this line, I said, tapping the paper, where it says granting full authority to manage, sell, encumber, or otherwise dispose of real property. Sutter glanced at Caleb. Michael took a too quick sip of coffee. Vanessa stared at the paper as if it would change under her gaze. Caleb opened his mouth, but the screen door creaked again and Theo walked in, Detective Alvarez behind him, badge already out, the air around her as calm as a library with rules everyone knows. Theo put his folder on the table and said, pleasant as pie, good morning. We brought some paperwork too. Vanessa's face went paper white. Tyler's knee stopped bouncing. Sutter's smile died a quick, quiet death. Caleb's eyes narrowed and he turned toward the door like he'd miscalculated the weather and gotten rained on. Who the hell are you? Michael blurted. Counsel, Theo said mildly. He slid the cease and desist across the table to Caleb, another copy toward Michael, another to the notary. And this is Detective Alvarez. She's here to observe and to note that you are, at this moment, attempting to procure signatures and legal authority from a competent adult by misrepresenting the nature of the documents. Alvarez didn't raise her voice. Keep your seats. Nobody's under arrest. Yet. Tyler recovered first, the way idiots do when they think volume is a tool. You can't just barge in here, he snapped. This is a private family matter. Alvarez looked at him like he was a curb she'd seen before. Elder exploitation is not a private matter. Caleb tried to gather the papers, but Theo put his hand on them, gentle, firm. We'll keep those, he said. Chain of evidence. He turned to the notary. Ma'am, you're welcome to leave. Or you can stay and watch your commission evaporate. The notary stood so fast her chair squealed. Excuse me, she said and fled, her little seal clutched to her like a purse in a windstorm. Sutter cleared his throat. Harbor Ridge has a long history of backing away when things smell wrong. Theo suggested, mild. Smart. Because we have recordings, witnesses, and a church full of ladies across town waiting to hear how you simplify title by stripping a woman's rights. Sutter glanced at Michael, who shrugged a shrug men use when they're not paid enough to sink with a ship. We'll withdraw, he said quickly, standing. No harm intended. Tell your counsel to expect a letter, Theo said. And tell your acquisitions team not to say once the guardianship goes through in people's living rooms. It reads poorly on paper. They left without their coffee. The house exhaled. But the worst wasn't Harbor Ridge, it was the boy I'd fed and the woman I'd tolerated. Vanessa's voice lost all syrup. How could you, she hissed, and the you sounded like a snake dropping its S. After everything we've done. For me. I said, and it came so soft she blinked. Everything you've done for me? Tyler slapped a palm on the table. Boys think noise equals power. You tricked us. You tried to sell my house, I said. You tried to file to own me. You told a buyer you could deliver my life on a timeline. He went red. We were helping, he said weakly. We were trying to. Profit, Theo finished, voice still pleasant. That part is in the texts. We'll preserve those once the warrant's signed. He looked at Alvarez, she nodded once. Vanessa's eyes were chips of something once valuable melted into cheap jewelry. We're family, she said, as if the word should function like a password. I stood. My knees complained the way old houses do before a storm. I pressed my palm to the table. For 7 years, I'd had to fight to be heard above silence. Now sound had returned, and I used it. Family doesn't mean entitlement, I said. It means care. It means showing up with soup, not contracts. It means not counting my breaths like coins. Tyler glared. What are you going to do, Gran? Cut me out? You need me. Sit still, I said, and 30 years of teaching settled over the room like a net. He sat. I turned to Vanessa. You're going to leave my keys, my mail, and my spare house key here before you go. And you're going to tell your Caleb to look for new work. Caleb already had his hands up like a man at a border. Mrs. Monroe, he said carefully, I'm sure we can. You can call your malpractice carrier, Theo said cheerfully. Alvarez rose, calm and crisp. We're done here for now. Ms. Monroe, call me if they step foot on your porch without your invitation. She handed me a card, her name neat, her number straight. And keep your recorder charged. They filed out in a drip of expensive shoes and busted pride. The front door shut gently, no slams in my house. Ruth reappeared in the hall like a friendly ghost. Did I miss the fireworks? She asked. I sank into a chair and let my hands shake for the first time in 2 days. Ruth poured coffee. Theo squeezed my shoulder. The house hummed, satisfied. But I knew this wasn't the end. People like Vanessa don't retreat, they regroup. Boys like Tyler don't apologize, they plot worse plans with stupider friends. Revenge isn't finished when the first wave breaks, it's finished when the tide leaves you clean. Theo packed the papers and promised to deliver copies of the cease and desist to their email and their mother's kitchen table if necessary. Ruth washed cups in my sink like she'd lived here her whole life. I walked to the front room, knelt by the north wall again, and took the tin from the sideboard where I'd tucked it safe for the commotion. Open it, Ruth said softly, like a friend saying grace. I slid my thumbnail under the lid. Metal remembered old springs and gave with a pop. Inside, wrapped in wax paper, lay 3 things. A small black and white photo of Walter standing by this house the day we bought it, hair too long, grin too wide, a brass key with a tiny tag stamped 143, and a letter in Walter's square hand, already opening at the creases. My fingers shook. I touched the paper. I looked at Ruth, then at the ceiling because Walter was somewhere above it if heaven is aim and not altitude. I unfolded the letter and read the first line. In case someone ever tries to take what we built, Lily. My breath went thin. I read the next line, and my heart did something it hadn't done since the day he died. I found the last weapon Walter left me. Walter's letter smelled faintly of cedar and dust, like the inside of a drawer that's kept its secrets too long. His square handwriting marched across the page, confident, no wasted loops. In case someone ever tries to take what we built, Lily, go to box 143 at First Pioneer. The key's in the tin. Don't let anyone talk you out of it. Inside you'll find proof enough to stop a thief and a reminder that you never need to ask permission to keep what's yours. Love, W. There was more names, dates, the way he always left breadcrumbs for me to follow, but my eyes kept coming back to the number. 143. A grocery cart number. A hymn number. A secret waiting patiently in a vault for a day just like this one. Ruth squeezed my elbow like she was answering a question I hadn't said out loud. We leave now, she said. When Ruth decides, trains reschedule to suit her. First Pioneer had been swallowed by bigger banks twice over. The Midtown branch, Brenda's branch, still carried a ghost of the old logo on the glass if the light hit right. I tucked the brass key into my palm and felt the little tag, 143, press into my lifeline. The processor hummed under my hair, catching the sneeze of a teller across the room, the soft shush of forms sliding over laminate. I never knew paper made so many small sounds. Brenda spotted us and came out from behind her desk with her cardigan swishing like a bell. Well, aren't you a sight for good news, she said, and then saw my face. Not here, honey, she added softly, and ushered us into the small room where people talk about money like it's a skittish animal. I set the key on the desk. This is from First Pioneer days, I said. Number 143. Walter Hart. My husband's name felt like a hand at my back. Brenda's eyebrows rose. Lord, that's a vintage. She turned to her monitor, clicked through menus that looked like file cabinets trying to be computers. We keep legacy boxes off-site, but the index is local. She typed, squinted, and then gave a low whistle. Well, I'll be. Box 143 is mapped to our internal vault, never migrated. Which means, she glanced at me. If the key fits, we can open it. She brought a metal tray and an older gentleman from the back who wore a tie clip like men used to wear respect. He introduced himself as Klein. Held over from First Pioneer, he said with shy pride. I was here when that vault got locked the last time. We signed forms. Klein unlocked a heavy door that breathed cool air when it opened, the kind of clean, dry smell paper loves. The vault was a small city of tiny doors, each with its own promise behind it. He guided us to a low drawer and nodded to my key. My fingers didn't shake until the metal slid home and turned like it had been waiting for this exact small movement for decades. The drawer came free with a soft weight. Klein set it on the counter and left us alone with it, closing the vault door to a polite gap, the way a doctor closes a curtain so you can gather yourself. Inside the drawer lay a manila envelope with Lily, open only if needed in Walter's hand, a thinner envelope stamped recorded, a neat stack of bonds tied with string, and a little cassette tape in a plastic case labeled, again in Walter's square letters, for courage. Ruth made a sound I'd heard at funerals and weddings, a sound like both ends of life share a door. I slid the thinner envelope out first and tapped its corner against my wrist to settle the pages the way Walter taught me. On top was an original promissory note dated 2004, in the amount of $120,000, borrower, Mark Monroe and Vanessa Monroe, secured by a deed of trust recorded against 112 Ridgeline Drive. My son and his wife. Walter as lender. Payments interest only for 2 years, amortizing thereafter. The maturity date in 2019 circled twice in red pencil with a neat notation, if unpaid, demand in full, if she ever tries to move you, call it. Underneath lay the deed of trust, stamped by the county recorder with a book and page number, as official as rain. And beneath that an assignment, notarized the year Walter died, assigning the note and deed of trust to me, for love and protection. I sat down hard on the stool. Sound telescoped, the hum became a line, voices like dots on it. I saw Mark's grin the day he told us they'd found a place, with a garage big enough for dreams. I saw Vanessa's hand already measuring curtains. We thought we were helping them start, and we just also laid down a fence in case anybody forgot which direction home sits. Ruth put a hand on my back. It's enforceable, she whispered. I opened the fat manila envelope. Walter had included copies of property tax statements for Ridgeline, insurance declarations, and a letter in his patient voice, printed in blue. If the note is unpaid, you tell the holder you're calling it. Do it calmly. If they can't pay, foreclose calmly. Don't let shame stop you. The shame belongs elsewhere. The bonds under the string made a quiet hiss when I touched them. Savings for rainy days, a sticky note read. And Lily, if it's pouring, buy yourself a storm coat first. The cassette was last. I didn't have a player, but I carried the weight of his voice in my chest anyway. Ruth picked it up like a bird. "We'll find a tape deck," she said firmly. "I know 3 church ladies who never throw anything out." Brenda knocked gently at the vault door and peered in the crack. "Everything in order?" she asked. "Everything," I said. My voice surprised me with its steadiness. "Brenda, does your bank still post notices of default for deeds of trust? Or is that all handled by trustees now?" "Trustee starts it," she said, impressed and maybe a little afraid of me, which I didn't mind. "But we know the folks who do. You want a referral?" "I want Theo," I said, folding the papers back into the envelope with the care you use for a newborn. "And then I want to bake." Theo's office smelled like coffee and purpose when we brought him the box's guts. He read the note and the deed of trust with that way he has, lips moving just enough to call the words true. "Well, Ms. Monroe," he said softly, "you brought me a hammer." "Don't splinter the house," I said. "Use it to knock sense where sense belongs." He nodded, already marking up a demand letter. "We'll notice default and give them the statutory cure period. If they pay, good. If not, we proceed. Meanwhile, the bar complaint goes in today. Alvarez has the exploitation file open and warm. Your recordings will keep it that way. And I'm sending a letter to Tyler's employer's compliance officer. He's registered. He has fiduciary duties his HR department will enjoy reading about." I felt the tiniest flicker of pity, not for Vanessa, who polished her meanness, but for the boy who used to bring me dandelions and ask if wish seeds worked better when you shouted them. Then I remembered him leaning over my table, sliding a pen at me slick with lies, and the pity hardened into the kind of resolve you can set a cup on. "Make it clean," I said. "No fireworks. Paper cuts. The kind that sting all day." Theo smiled like we were co-conspirators, which we were. "We'll do it in daylight and we'll do it by the book." The book came to church, like books do, tucked under Pastor Elaine's arm. I'd texted Vanessa the night before, careful to keep my old signals in place, "Meet me at church at 10 to talk about plans." She answered with a heart and nothing else. Hearts are cheap. The fellowship hall smelled like coffee and folding chairs. Pastor Elaine had set the room the way she does for funerals, space for people to sit with their mistakes. The women's circle filtered in with casseroles because grief and victory both make you hungry. Detective Alvarez stood by the side door with her badge tucked away, not a threat, just a fact. Theo sat at a metal table with his folder open and a pen in his hand. Ruth poured coffee in styrofoam cups because redemption is best served hot and disposable. Vanessa arrived 10 minutes late, wrapped in a coat the color of clean refrigerators, her hair too smooth. Tyler trailed behind, eyes slightly red, jaw set. He looked around, misreading everything. "Church?" he said to me, like I'd decorated a trap with candles. "It's where people tell the truth," I said. He snorted, tiny and teenage, and took a chair at the table like this was a meeting he could run better if given the agenda early. Pastor Elaine opened with a prayer for good decisions. It wasn't for them, not really. It was for me, to keep my hand steady when a different sort of justice wants to get in first. When she finished, I stood, palms flat on the metal table, and told the story out loud where the walls could hold it. The kitchen whispers I heard that first afternoon, the card from Caleb, the meeting in the glass building, the cheap notary and the expensive lies, the cease and desist delivered like bread to a doorstep. I didn't make my voice dramatic. I let it be plain. Plain hurts longer. Vanessa kept her eyes on her nails. Tyler tried to look bored and landed on nervous. A murmur rippled through the women's circle. You can't hide scorn in a room built for casseroles. When I finished, Theo slid a red folder across the table toward Vanessa and Tyler. "Notice of default," he said, calm as a librarian. "On the promissory note dated 2004, secured by the deed of trust on your residence, 112 Ridgeline. The note matured in 2019. Our client, Mrs. Monroe, is calling it now. You have the statutory period, 30 days, to cure. Total due, with interest, fees and taxes paid by the beneficiary, is $182,412.19. The number landed like a book dropped from a balcony. Vanessa's eyes jerked up. "You can't," she said, but it came out small, the way a match complains to a rainstorm. "I can," I said gently. "Your name is on the loan, darling. You remember the day you signed. You wore a red sweater and pretended not to smudge the ink." Tyler looked at the paper like it might sprout legs and run if he yelled at it. I don't live there, he said, dumb as bad luck. But she does, Theo said, perfectly pleasant, and tapped the line where Vanessa's signature lived under a better version of herself. Payment in full cures it. If payment doesn't arrive by the deadline, we'll instruct the trustee to proceed. You may also wish to advise your counsel, he nodded toward Alvarez's quiet corner, that separate investigations are ongoing. Vanessa swallowed. I watched the movement. It looked like someone trying to gulp down a stone. We don't have that, she whispered. The way you admit thunder is loud. You have a Lexus, Ruth muttered near the coffee, and someone coughed to turn a laugh into something kinder. Tyler found anger, his favorite cheap suit. So this is your revenge? He snapped at me. Take our house? Put us on the street? You're evil. I leaned forward, letting him see my face the way a mirror shows you your posture. No, I said. This is my boundary. You tried to sell my home and my freedom. I'm selling your illusion that there are no consequences. Pastor Elaine put a hand on my shoulder, steadying more than approving. She turned to Vanessa, soft and unbending. There's also a way out of this that looks like repentance, she said. Apologize. Withdraw any petitions. Put in writing that you will not attempt to control Lily's finances or living situation again. Agree to counseling. Make restitution where harm was done. People can change. Vanessa's eyes darted to Tyler. He stared at the ceiling like he was trying to read a skylight. The silence stretched. Theo slid another paper forward. In the meantime, Ms. Monroe has executed a trust for her home. Guardianship is off the table. Any further attempts will be met with more paper than you have bins for. Vanessa pulled in a breath through her teeth. You don't have to humiliate us, she said, and there was actual hurt under the varnish. We were scared. We thought, she stopped, because the thought she'd been thinking didn't make a good sound in a room like this. I don't want perfect words, I said. I want different behavior. We let the room hold that, like bread rising without anyone poking it. Then, because I am who I am, I poured Vanessa a cup of coffee and set it near her hand. She didn't touch it. Detective Alvarez walked over softly, set a card on the table. If either of you would like to come by the station and talk about what pressures made you think this was the right path, she said evenly, I'll listen. She turned to me and added lower, and if you see a car idling out front, you call me. The meeting broke like a wave hitting pilings, energy going everywhere, 2 or 3 women hugging me and then covering it with, let's wrap these cookies, because love is always safer with a task. Vanessa left first, coat folded over her arm like punctuation. Tyler hovered, then followed, leaving the red folder where his chair had been as if weight might return to it from the hallway. Theo collected papers, stacked them so neatly I wanted to iron his tie. Now the paper does the talking, he said. You did the hard part. Not yet, I said. The brass key in my pocket felt like a promise with edges. Walter left a cassette. He called it for courage. I need to hear it. Ruth snapped her fingers like she just remembered where she put Christmas. Edna, she said. She still has the tape deck she uses to practice choir parts. Ruth had a phone to her ear and a plan in her mouth before I could nod. We drove 3 blocks to Edna's tidy house, the one with geraniums so vigorous they look like they have opinions. Edna is 91 and has a spine like a metronome. She ushered us in, set the little black tape player on the coffee table, and patted the sofa beside her. Press play when you're ready, she said, hands folded like prayer and mischief both lived there. I pressed the button. The tape clicked, and then Walter's voice poured into the room like summer. My processor caught the rasp I'd forgotten, a little rough at the edges from years in the plant, tender in the places where my name lived. Hey Lil, he said. If you're hearing me, it means either I did something right or something went sideways enough that my belt and suspenders approach is paying off. Edna snorted. I laughed through my nose and tasted salt. He told me what I already held, the note, the deed of trust, the assignment. Then his voice softened into a place I only ever got to hear at night. There's one more thing, sweetheart, he said. In case paper and decency don't do the job, call the number at the bottom of the letter. Ask for Hanover. He's an old shop steward who became a state inspector. He owes me for something I never asked him to pay back. Tell him my name and box 143. He'll know. And Lily, don't let anyone tell you that staying put is selfish. You are the roots in this ground. The tape clicked. Silence made itself at home in the room again, but this time it brought a chair. I took out the letter, the one from the box with Walter's neat line at the bottom, and my fingers found the number as if they'd known it before my eyes did. I dialed. The ring buzzed in my ear, then a click. Hanover, a voice said. Old, with a ridge of authority you don't get from badges, but from years of telling the truth when it makes people uncomfortable. Mr. Hanover, I said. My name is Lillian Monroe. Walter Hart told me to call if someone tried to take our house. There was a pause that felt like a door unlocking. Mrs. Monroe, he said, and the way he said my name made my knees go warm. I've been waiting 20 years for your call. Tell me everything from the beginning. I started to speak, just as my phone vibrated in my other hand with Brenda's name flashing and the bank's number beneath it. 2 calls at once, 2 roads opening. I put Hanover on speaker and tapped Brenda in. Lily, Brenda said without preamble, voice tight. We just blocked an attempted wire out of your savings for $48,200. The authorization came from your guest Wi-Fi and a device we've seen at Ridgeline. We froze it and flagged the IP. Detective Alvarez is already pinged. Her breath landed. Do you want me to lock every dollar down? Ruth's eyes met mine. She didn't say don't be scared. She just stood up and headed for the door, keys already in hand. I'll get Alvarez, she said. You get the rest. I looked at the phone, at the number Walter left me and the name that promised leverage I hadn't even dreamed. Then I looked at the other screen and saw what greed looks like when it's cornered. It tries the back door. I took a breath that felt like a new seam tightening straight. Mr. Hanover, I said, lifting the letter, stay on the line. We're about to need every tool your old toolbox can spare. The phone pressed warm to my ear, and Walter's voice still seemed to echo in the silence after that tape. Hanover waited on the other end, steady as bedrock. Brenda's words about the frozen wire transfer hung heavy. My family hadn't wasted a minute. When one door shut, they tried to pry open another. I'm listening, Hanover said, voice like gravel ground fine. Tell me what they tried. I laid it out plain, the guardianship scheme, Caleb's slick office, the notary in beige, the Harbor Ridge men, the deed of trust Walter tucked away like a lantern for a dark road. I told him about Tyler and Vanessa, about the way greed made their voices sharp when they thought I couldn't hear. Box 143 wasn't just about the note, he said when I finished. Walter and I knew inspectors, clerks, folks who keep their hands clean but their ears open. I'll call in a favor. You'll get an audit on every document Caleb Stone ever filed, and if one smells like yesterday's trash, it'll be on a judge's desk before he finishes his morning coffee. Thank you, I whispered, surprised my voice didn't tremble. You thank Walter, Hanover said gently. He planned for storms before you ever saw a cloud. When I hung up, the kitchen was full. Ruth had brought Detective Alvarez back with her, Theo trailed behind with his pen still in his pocket, and Edna had her tape deck tucked under her arm like a pet. Alvarez's calm eyes fixed on me. We've got attempted fraud through the bank, she said. That makes this a criminal matter, not just civil. I sat down, smoothing my cardigan. Then let's make it clean. Alvarez set her badge on the table, heavy as truth. Mrs. Monroe, do you want to press charges? I thought of Tyler's little boy hands covered in peanut butter, of Vanessa's brittle smile at Thanksgiving, of Mark my son, who'd once begged us for help to buy Ridgeline and who, by silence, had let this grow. Then I thought of the card from Caleb, the notepad Tyler shoved at me, Vanessa's voice naming Oak Pines like it was a prize. Yes, I said steady. I want every step on record. I want them to learn that betrayal has a cost. The next week felt like pulling weeds. Slow, dirty, but satisfying when the roots come free. Alvarez's team subpoenaed Tyler's texts, Vanessa's emails, Caleb's client files. Every line matched what my recorder had already caught. Theo filed the notice of default, the clock ticked on Ridgeline. Brenda called daily with updates, no new attempts, Lily, but the flags are holding. And me? I baked. Muffins for the church ladies, pies for the detectives, cookies for Theo's office. Because work sweetens the waiting. The day of reckoning came in a courtroom that smelled faintly of dust and polish. Tyler sat at the defense table, jaw set, tie crooked. Vanessa beside him, hands clasped so tight her knuckles shone. Caleb was absent, already suspended by the bar, his name whispered like rot. Alvarez testified first, then Brenda with her calm banker's voice. Theo introduced the recordings. My own voice, steady and clear, filled the courtroom. I understand every word you've all said to me this week. Tyler flinched when he heard it played back. When it was my turn, I walked to the stand slow but upright, pearls at my throat, Walter's courage in my pocket. I lost my hearing for 7 years, I told the judge. And in that silence, I trusted. When I got it back, I heard my family plan to sell my life like it was a set of curtains. I didn't rush. I listened. And now I'm here, asking this court to make them hear me. The judge's gavel sounded like thunder. Guardianship denied. Petition dismissed with prejudice. Investigation into attempted exploitation referred for prosecution. My trust in place, my deed safe, my house mine. Outside, reporters crowded. I held Ruth's arm and lifted my chin. What do you want people to know? One shouted. That silence doesn't mean weakness, I said. And that even old women can roar when it's time. Tyler wouldn't meet my eyes as deputies guided him away for questioning on the wire fraud. Vanessa tried, but hers skittered off mine like moths on glass. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the one with Walter's ring mark carved into the wood, and finally opened the blue envelope he left in the shoebox. Inside was one line in his neat square hand. Lil, remember, revenge isn't about hate. It's about balance. Tip the scale, then rest. I set the letter down, poured myself a cup of coffee, and listened to the house breathe. The floorboards creaked, the kettle hissed, the night wind tapped the porch rail. Every sound was mine again. And so was my life. Still water, I thought. Still water drowns fools.